Let's just see here. Streaming. YouTube's taking a minute because they don't like me. YouTube keeps giving me community notices. The last stream I did. Right, now we're streaming. So what? What'd you say? I didn't catch that. So, yeah, the last stream I did was actually purely accidental. I didn't mean to be streaming. And now I've got to get on the road and drive for 7 hours or 6 hours. So I thought, and I don't want to take my whole rig with me, so I thought I'd do a quick one. Just to say g'day, Happy New Year's to yous. I'm particularly excited for 2026 because 2025 tended to suck the balls quite hard. It's funny, GG33 told me, well, he didn't tell me directly, but he was saying if these are your numbers. He said, I wish I could stop doing that, but I can't. Anyway, he said, if these are your numbers, and these were my numbers, he said, nah, this is not your year, bro. And I was like, screw you, buddy. Turned out he was right. The numbers don't lie. Anyway, for those of you who weren't alive in the 80s and 90s, or weren't old enough to be getting the dole in the 80s and 90s, I just wanted to give you a little taste of what this was. How you got the dole. You went to a place called the DSS, and this is how you did it.
Under special skills, you've got fashion photographer.
Yeah.
How many interviews you had?
Nah.
But you put in an application.
Yeah.
But you didn't get any interviews.
Nah. Can I go now?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, but I know what'll make you feel better.
Oh no, not another box of dogs!
It's another box of dogs!
Ben Mendelsohn nails that. Right, that's from a movie called Idiot Box. It's actually on. If you go to YouTube, the whole movie's there. You just type in the search bar Idiot Box 1996, and you'll come up with a classic Australian movie. I was going to do a whole episode. I might still do it, just going over bits and pieces from the movie, because it is such a great bit of Australian moviness. Anyway, we're not going to worry about that. Also, I still have planned to do the episode on Ted Kaczynski. It's quite funny. I got that last stream I did was accidental. That's why it only went for 8 minutes. I thought I was just recording, but I'd hit start streaming instead of start recording. And when I looked back to stop recording, that's when I discovered I'd been streaming for 8 minutes. So I ended the stream. Anyway, it was just a little teaser for the Ted Kaczynski episode, because I still want to do that, because there's a lot to discuss in his manifesto. The funny thing is, you can go to YouTube and listen to the entire manifesto, people reading the manifesto, and no problem. But when I do it, I get a community guideline strike for reading Ted Kaczynski. Now, I might have been a little more enthusiastic than most people. I think most people read it and they go, oh no, this is no good. Whereas I came from the angle of like, yeah, this is what we got to do. So I might have been a bit, I wasn't talking about the bang bangs. I wasn't talking about that. I was just talking about, pointing out. Anyway, happy 2026, everyone. This is going to be a short stream. I do need to get on the road. I've got a lot of driving ahead of me. But as I said, I'm going to wait for the weird traffic to die down and maybe for the sun to set a little bit. Wait for the weather to cool down because it is a hot one today here in Melbourne. Not as hot as it's going to be tomorrow, but it's still pretty warm out there. So, point is, Maduro has been captured. And I say good riddance to him. The only thing that should be watermelon flavoured is watermelons. So, get that Midori off the planet. I don't care. The only thing I did think, I wonder if I went to America, I reckon there'd be a market for watermelon flavoured fried chicken. Big market for that. I was thinking the other day, is people feeding monkeys? Oh, I'm not going to say that. All right, I have some things for 2026. I'm going to try to be nicer to people, and not, I'm not going to attack the New World Order so much because I don't know what it'd be like to run the world. It's probably a pain in the ass to run the world. Having said that, I would do it a lot better than they do. I'd nail that shit. And that's why I'm running. I actually think that a better political system than the one we got now is you go into office, and if anyone goes, I could do better than that, well, then they get to do it for a day. You get one day. And if anyone says, I could do better than that, well, then they come in and do it. We just have a revolving door of people who are constantly saying, I could do better than that. And we see if they can. And eventually, we'll get to that one guy who actually can do it better than everyone else. Or woman. Could be a woman. That one person. Anyway, Maduro. I was getting mixed up with Midori. But seriously, nothing should be watermelon flavoured other than watermelons. It's a disgusting... It's not even a flavour. It's just an annoyance. I've got four watermelon flavoured Chupa Chups here that will probably go uneaten forever. Come the apocalypse, when there's no food, I'll find these 4 watermelon flavoured Chupa Chups and be like, oh my god, food! And I'll still look at them and go, watermelon, and I'll throw them out. That's how disgusting watermelon flavour is in anything. If you flavour your things watermelon, then you should be put up against the wall. Anyway, so yeah, I think Trump has done well to capture Maduro and his wife. I think, credit where credit's due. Most American regimes have simply gone in and, orchestrated it so that their own people either stick a machete up their bunghole or get them hung or whatever, but they tend to kill them. So, the fact that he's simply gone in and, kidnapped the guy and his wife, I think it's a step forward for free market capitalism. Because who knows? I gotta say though, I am very against this, them blowing up the drug boats. I think that's disgusting. I think it's wrong. The loss of innocent drugs is unacceptable. I also just want to say, I think it's kind of depressing that we live in a time where anytime there's any kind of terrorist event, people just straight away go Mossad, false flags, CIA, bullshit. I think it's quite sad that we've come to this. And I feel bad for ISIS, because they probably plan all these attacks and then they carry out the attacks And then they go to claim credit, and everyone's like, Mossad. And they're like, there's Jews, they steal everything, even my credit. You know, I did this job when I started doing this job. I did it to take credit for my work. You think I like planning? I hate planning. You think I like bombing things? I mean, that's fun, but I don't know why he suddenly sounds Jewish. Anyway, he's a Jewish ISIS person. What else? What else have we got? It just must be very frustrating, you know? Okay, that's odd. This is... Oh, that's because that's pinned. Okay, so anyway. What else was I going to talk about? Yeah, feeding grapes to monkeys seems racist. I don't know why. It does. I'll tell you what, let's go. Since I'm only going to be taking the laptop, I might not get time to cover this, so let's just cover a little bit of it, shall we? So, Ted Kaczynski, Industrial Society and Its Future, Theodore Kaczynski, 1995. So, this essay first appeared in the New York Times and the Washington Post on September 19, 1995. It was published under the pseudonym FC for Freedom Club. I wonder if, what's his name, got the idea for Fight Club from reading this. So the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. I don't think he's wrong there, right? I mean, you've got the mouse utopia thing. That seems to be what we're heading towards. However, in mouse utopia, the difference is, in mouse utopia, everything was taken care of. So they all had housing, they all had food. Right, and once those basic things, they just kind of devolved into the mess they're in. So we're kind of devolving into that. We're heading in that direction, but we're not there yet, because still there are a lot of challenges. So I think they've learned enough to know that it's probably not a good idea to give humans everything they want. But that does seem to be what the left and the socialists and all that kind of people, that they tend to want that. I wonder about Elon Musk's desire to create the culture as framed by Ian M. Banks. Does seem to be potentially a very bad idea. You know what I mean? Like, in the culture books, everyone has everything they need taken care of, and there's enough for everyone. You can kind of do whatever you want, which is grouse, but does it take into account, you know, people's proclivities for needing meaning in their lives? I mean, they go off and design planets and things. I just wonder if we can actually get through that. It's interesting. Anyway, they have greatly increased the life expectancy of those of us who live in advanced countries, but they have destabilized society, have made life unfulfilling, have subjected human beings to indignities, have led to widespread psychological suffering, in the third world to physical suffering as well, and have inflicted severe damage on the natural world. Now, I would say that I don't think it has necessarily increased our lifespans in a lot of ways. You know, there's places in the world where people live to 100, and it's just kind of, that's the average life expectancy. And the big difference is they eat natural food. It's like people in Osaka in Japan, there's the Eskimos or Inuits, whatever you want to call them, and there's the people in Africa, and they eat entirely different diets, but the difference to our diet is that their diets are all natural. hang on, I'm just going to adjust because I believe, I think I know who that is. Yes. Shit, that's right, bro. I just had to pull that up a bit so I can actually read the chat. It's a bit hard to read it from here. Anyway. There we go. This is difficult to do with just one mouse and having to operate the mouse backwards. Anyway. The continued development of technology will worsen the situation. It will certainly subject human beings to greater indignities and inflict greater damage on the natural world. It will probably lead to greater social disruption and psychological suffering, and it may lead to increased physical suffering even in advanced countries. The industrial technological system may survive or it may break down. If it survives, it may eventually achieve a low level of physical and psychological suffering, but only after passing through a long and very painful period of adjustment, and only at the cost of permanently reducing human beings and many other living organisms to engineered products and mere cogs in the social machine. It's very interesting that he saw a lot of this coming, and he kind of nailed it with a lot of this stuff. But there are some things he missed. And were he still alive today, I would love to get his updated take on all this. Anyway. Furthermore, if the system survives, the consequences will be inevitable. There is no way of reforming or modifying the system so as to prevent it from depriving people of dignity and autonomy. That's very true. I mean, with this whole AI running shit, like, what are the rules going to be? Because we can't decide on what the rules are now. So you're going to have these, and when they change the rules, they'll just update and bang, new rules, new laws. So men are allowed in women's bathrooms, then they're not, then people, like, it's just nuts that putting everything under AI control. It seems kind of like it kind of seems like a good idea because you automate everything, everyone knows but the problem is we've been on this planet in this form for like 300,000 years and we haven't figured out shit. So I don't know how introducing AI at this point is going to help anyone but those in control of the AI, which will be essentially people in Israel at this point. That's what it seems. In Gaza. Trump's Gaza. Trump's Gaza. What a plan. If the system breaks down, the consequences will be very painful. But the bigger the system grows, the more disastrous the results of its breakdown will be. So, if it is to break down, it had best break down sooner rather than later. I think many people feel that way. Those who have no faith in the system want it to break down now. Those who have faith in the system, they want to go all the way with this because they will be like gods and kings. Harvey was meant to come on the other day and we were going to discuss a bunch of stuff. We were both too tired by the time we got into the studio. He'd had rather a big night the night before because it was New Year's Day and we had been up drinking a lot the night before, so we didn't get to it. But he was telling me about this idea that there'll be all these different places on the planet where you go and there's like the Windows Society, and then there'll be the Elon Musk Society, and you can basically choose, do you want to live, which one you want to live in, which I am hoping that there will be some space for autonomous individuals who simply want to live. Bring on the rain, I'm ready. Well, yeah, we're all ready for it, baby. We are all ready. I can listen to Axel break it down. He's fucking mad for it. He just wants everything to crash, which is a very Gen X kind of attitude, I must say. We, after growing up with hippies and beatniks for parents, it's just like, burn it all down. End this disastrous nonsense. Anyway. We therefore advocate a revolution against the industrial system. This revolution may or may not make use of violence. It may be sudden or it may be relatively gradual, process spanning a few decades. We can't predict any of that, but we do outline in a very general way the measures that those who hate the industrial system should take in order to prepare the way for a revolution against that form of society. Now, here's where it gets a little... this is what he didn't see coming. And I'm kind of surprised, because he was a very smart guy. But one of the reasons I want to read this whole thing, get through it eventually, little by little, is because he's kind of... Kaczynski's kind of held up as this guy who, like, he saw it all coming and he acted to stop it, but he didn't see it all coming. He saw a lot of it, but he was very much a man of his time. What's very interesting about it is how little has actually changed. It's just the infection has gotten worse. That infection I'm talking about is, that I'm not talking about all people on the left, but it is very much the left has become infected with these ideas and ideologies that are not useful to humanity. And progressivism is purely progress for progress's sake, because people make money out of these things. And as soon as you get what you want, well, you got to find something else to want. And it's got to be outrageous and something that, like a lot of those people that are on the progressive side of things who go out there and fight for this and they fight for that, they don't really want to win, because as soon as they win, they're out of a job and they have to find something else to complain about. Anyway, back to this. This is not to be a political revolution. Its object will be to overthrow not governments, but the economic and technological basis of the present society. So what we've become now is you can't separate one from the other. You can't say we're just going to wipe out the... I mean, even back then, I don't think you could do it. But this is the Luddites' fight. This is the fight that the Luddites had, and they get a bad name because they lost. So anyone that's against this stuff will be considered a Luddite. And the Luddites, all they were fighting against was being replaced. So anyway, in this article we give attention to only some of the negative developments that have grown out of the industrial technological system. Other such developments we mention only briefly or ignore altogether. This does not mean that we regard these other developments as unimportant. For practical reasons, we have to confine our discussion to areas that have received insufficient public attention or in which we have something new to say. For example, since there are well-developed environmental and wilderness movements, we have written very little about environmental degradation or the destruction of wild nature, even though we consider these to be highly important. But here's where he digs in. I think this is his big problem, and a lot of us have a big problem with this stuff these days. The psychology of modern leftism. Now, I think the whole left and right paradigm is kind of a waste of time. I think, because not that long ago, people on the right were the horrible potential dictators that wanted everyone to live under their religious restrictions, and everyone needed to be the same. We had to break, and so people pushed back against that. That's what I always thought comedy was speaking. They talk about speaking truth to power in comedy, but no one does that now. There are very few comedians out there who do that. And even the ones who used to do it actually go back over their stuff and kind of go, well, I disagree with a lot of this stuff now because I see where it's led. Now, there are still comedians out there that do this, speak truth to power, but it's not like it used to be. Mostly it's like people get up and go, oh, I'm going to speak truth to power. Here's 20 minutes on my dick. Or my vagina, as the case may be. Which is fine, Plenty of room in comedy for dick and vag jokes, but unless your penis is running the world, you are not speaking truth to power. Anyway, almost everyone will agree that we live in a deeply troubled society. Still true today. One of the most widespread manifestations of the craziness of our world is leftism, so a discussion of the psychology of leftism can serve as an introduction to the discussion of the problems of modern society in general. I gotta say, this guy was super based. Like, this is, as Dankula said, because Dankula does a whole thing on this, it is some of the most based stuff you'll ever hear, but it is very much from a particular point of view. I believe that's where I got up to last time in that accidental stream. So let's continue. But what is leftism? During the first half of the 20th century, leftism could have been practically identified with socialism. Today, the movement is fragmented and it is not clear who can properly be called a leftist. I gotta say, I'm like, the left in the past, they did some great things. They achieved a lot of stuff that I'm very grateful for. But they have clearly gone insane. And I guess all of those things that they achieved in the past reveal their ultimate end goal, which they are moving towards now. But we're nowhere near the end game at this point. We're about the mid game, I'd say. I think a lot of the stuff that the left did in the 20th century would be considered your opening position. If we put this in chess terms, these were your opening positions. This was bringing out your, your pawns to E and F5 or E and F4, pushing one towards 5, or rather D and E. Sorry, D and E4, bringing your bishops out and your knights. Classic English defense, I think it is. I can't remember. I don't know enough about it. That would be considered. So I'd say now we are in the mid to end game. But see, this, what you're saying here, Jake, the right is National Socialism. National, all for that. It's kind of hard to see. I don't know where that light's coming from, but yeah, I mean, socialism is very much a leftist idea. So you've got, I mean, to me, that does seem like a good balance of left and right, National Socialism. However, saying that on YouTube will get me another community strike. So therefore, disavow. I disavow. Absolutely disavow, because I am streaming to YouTube at the moment, so I've got to be a bit faggy about it. I was going to stop streaming to YouTube. I wasn't going to do it for this, certainly, because all I get on YouTube these days are copyright strikes and community guideline strikes, just for talking about stuff. Anyway, we'll see what happens. I'll be surprised. I'll be kind of amazed if I get a copyright strike for showing a bit of Idiot Box. I will kind of know that I am getting over the target a bit, because that whole film is on there, and they got no problem with leaving the film on there for free. Nation equals your people. Okay, but who are the nation now? I mean, we're so diluted. That's another thing I want to talk about. Multiculturalism. Multicultural, and this is like, I'm not trying to bag on multiculturalism. I don't know how to phrase this. Multiculturalism is essentially just the death of your culture, because it works on a small scale. Australia's been a good example of multiculturalism in a positive way for a long time, but again, this is the beginning game. You can bring in other cultures if they're going to fit in with your culture, but ultimately, when you bring in all these other cultures, there is always going to be one particular culture that wants to take over and dominate. And now there's a fight going on for which culture that's going to be. And I'll tell you this, it's not going to be white Christians. Unless, we stand up and say, all right, well, enough of this. If you want to be in our country, you can fucking do things our way. But essentially, that particular tribe, I'm going to try and be nicer and not name things and, try and navigate this. But that particular tribe, they refer to Islam as the broom that they are going to use to sweep away Christianity. And whatever you think about Christianity, our nation is founded on it. People like to shit on the things that Christians and Catholics and whatnot have done in the world, but, if you like hospitals and universities, and you like that, you're not married to your cousin, and you actually had to go out and, and you spread out your tribe became much bigger, then, you got a kind of bit of a tip of the hat to those religions, as, whatever you think about religion, all that ever gets talked about is the bad stuff. There's been a lot of good stuff as well, but that's life. There's good and bad in everything. So I don't have a lot of faith in National Socialism for this country. I don't see it really taking off. I don't see, I just don't really see it. People are way too kind of mind controlled for that. Yeah, they're the ones we're talking about, Jack. Yep. You, yes, you penetrated my meaning. I knew you would. And that tribe, they want to take things over. They want to run things. And why wouldn't they? It's like that song, Everybody Wants to Drool on Girls. The original was Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Whenever I sing that song, it's Everybody Wants to Drool on Girls, which I think is more accurate, to be honest. But I do got to say, like, if I ran the world, shit would be much better. So vote for me or get fucked. Right. Today the movement is fragmented and it's not clear who can properly be called a leftist. when we speak of leftists in the article, we have in mind mainly socialists, collectivists, politically correct types, feminists, gay and disability activists, animal rights activists, and the like. It's interesting because the Austrian painter said, "I have no problem with that tribe in particular and the people of that tribe. It just happens that they're all communists." So now it seems like the communists have become socialists, but there are still many communists out there. But I imagine that socialism is just one step towards communism. The thing I do like about Natsock, I'm not even going to say it, but that particular ideology of the German the Austrian painter, I mean, he actually it did strike up a good balance where you had socialism, which was the state taking care of the people, but you also had nationalism, which was the people taking care of the state. So there was a kind of a balance about it that I don't know, might have worked. I guess we'll never know because it got shut down pretty damn quickly. And yeah, it is an interesting ideology. It would be interesting to see if that could take off, but it's never going to be like just for white people anymore. You can't have that, and I just don't see them ever letting that happen. Like if we suddenly turned around and went, right, we're doing that, we would suddenly find ourselves the enemies of the world. And there would be people coming in to stick knives up people's butts. Speaking of people sticking knives up people's butts, Melbourne has become the stabbing capital of Australia. We used to be the most livable city. Now we're the stabbing capital. Which, you know, I think we deserve an award for that. Like a big golden knife statue or something like that. I think that, I think that would be fun. All right, so it's interesting as he gets into this, because I've read a lot of this before, but it's interesting how he navigates this discussion, even in this this manifesto that was written in 1995. He still has to kind of say, not all. And that whole not all thing, that becomes very annoying after a while, because you're like, you know, and I've been guilty of this as well, where women on Facebook would go along and they'd go, men need to do this, men do this all the time, and I'd go, well, not all. And it is very annoying, because clearly you're not talking about all. It's just, you know, just the ones that are, you know, attractive and you want to have sex with. The rest of them, they're inconsequential, so you're not even really talking about, you know. But I mean, they can't really make up their minds. Sandy, it is a bloody hot day, isn't it? It's unreal hot, but it's going to be even hotter tomorrow, I understand. Yeah. I'm kind of waiting for the heat of the day to pass by a bit before I hit the road. So I'm kind of probably going to be driving in the evening, probably get to my destination around 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., which is fine nowadays. I heard it was an accident. He fell on the way to the machete bin. Yeah, that I think that happens a lot. Did you hear about the one that happened the other day? Dudes jumped out on the... Okay, so first of all, New Year's Eve, there were 2 stabbings in the city. And there's pictures of the guy, one holding a machete. So clearly those machete bins... It's, I think the machete bins are treated like a take one, leave one type of deal. So you go on, you drop off one machete and you go, oh, here's a nice one, and you just take one. Kind of like one of those, you know, public book library things. Yeah, anyway, didn't exactly work. And then the other day there was a crash on the Monash freeway. One guy jumps out of his car and just starts running, and then a bunch of guys jump out of the other car, and they got balaclavas on, knives and machetes, and they're running down the Monash freeway. Oh man, it's getting exciting now. What I couldn't understand about it was they were going, and drivers on the Monash freeway immediately headed for the exits and were like having to turn off and go, oh, I'm getting out of here. They were in cars. These people were in cars, scared of dudes running around with a machete. You see that thing at your foot called an accelerator? You push that down, right? And that thing right in front of you is called a steering wheel, also called an aiming device. You could have neutralized the situation like that. But no one did. Everyone was just like, oh no, there's a guy with... And also, what are they going to do? Like, if they came at your car and they smashed your window, you're well within your rights to reverse over them. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, it's fun times. It's really fun times. Black speed bumps. Oh, fuck. Dude. Disavow. That was very funny, though. I'm trying not to get any more community guideline stripes. You're not helping, Jake. That was very funny, though. That's good. Anyway, but not everyone who is associated with one of these movements is a leftist. So the movements we're talking about are socialists, collectivists, political correctness types, feminists, gay and disability activists, animal rights activists, and the like. I saw something the other day. Someone posted something that was like, is there anything more disgusting than a human rights lawyer? It was because he won a bunch of money for a guy who said he suffered in jail, which I'm pretty sure the purpose of jail is to make you suffer. Yeah, they said he because they denied him access to other people, it affected his mental health. When I first went in, I had to do 2 weeks in solitary. The Australian guy, Jake, you'll know his name. I can't think. My brain is not braining at the moment. The Australian guy, the NSN guy, I think he's the New Zealand one. Yeah, they threw him in jail. He did a couple of 100 days in solitary. Now, I'm not sure if that's exactly true. I saw him talking about it. It wasn't quite clarified whether he did the whole time in solitary. But, you know, people do a lot of time in solitary. But this guy, who, you know, happened to not be white, some lawyer, who also was probably not white, came in and won him a bunch of money because the prison made him suffer. Now, there is a saying that mercy to the guilty is punishment to the victim. I think that's relevant here. But, I mean, shit, if I could have... That's it. Joel Davis? Thomas Sewell. I think it was Thomas Sewell that he was thrown in jail. It was one of them anyway. Either Joel Davis or Thomas Sewell. They went in the first time. That's a funny fucking story. But by funny I mean it's kind of funny, but it's also just like how fucked up the system is. So they were out having an event out in the bush somewhere, just basically minding their own business, and a bunch of activists turned up and protesters, and they were like, you know, blah blah blah. So I think it was Thomas. It was either Thomas or Joel confronted him and was being rather threatening to him, you know, like, because he was threatening them, so he was threatening them back. And the guy pissed himself. And because he pissed himself, the judge said, well, you were obviously acting in a very threatening way, so away you go. You did over 200 days in prison, possibly in solitary. But that same judge released a guy that was a guy just because he wore a dress. Did not make him not a guy. Definitely was a guy. I'm not weighing in on the trans argument at the moment. I'm just saying that this guy was a guy. He was a Sri Lankan or something trans individual who put a bomb in a toilet somewhere. The bomb went off while there was a military guy in there taking a piss, and it did damage the guy. But the judge, that same judge, Joel's still in jail for a post. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. So he released this guy who planted a bomb, but he jailed Thomas for making a guy piss on himself. And so now Joel's in jail for a post. I mean, we're heading towards England. We're going that way. And this last event has made it even worse. They've introduced more laws to, make it so you really can't say anything. So it's I don't know, that whole Bondi thing. I seem to also, I have to deal in 2026. I'm very happy it's 2026. I feel a lot better because it's 2026. Just as soon as I need to overcome my fear of success. Maybe that's what it. I don't know what it is or not. But I posted a thing the day of the Bondi thing. As soon as I saw that guy appear with the blood all over his face and the and the fresh bandages, like the blood had covered his face but somehow didn't absorb into the bandages, which, impressive. That's quality bandages there, mate. As soon as I saw it, I was like, that's fake. This guy is fake. He's, I don't know what's that. And the fact that there was another one from October 7, he just wrote, like, I just looked at it and was like, that's fake. So I posted about it. I said something like, don't you hate it when you see an acting job that you would have been perfect for, but your agent didn't even call you, etc., etc. Anyway, it started to pick up. I posted it on X, and it started to take off. Like, it got a bunch of retweets and a bunch of hate comments, which is a sign that something is going to take off. And I felt weird about it at the time. I was kind of like, maybe it's too early to post stuff like this. I'm just not quite up with how social media works these days, I guess, because I kind of was like, yeah, I don't want to be, posting something and then be proved wrong and then blah blah blah. But it was also like, yeah, well, there's going to be 1,000 of these posts tomorrow. There's going to be 1,000,000 of them. Anyway, I did end up deleting it, which was a stupid thing to do. But I didn't want to be the one jumping on that straight away. But then by the next day, it was proven right. So whatever. But so they've introduced new laws and they're making it harder for gun owners again. I know a lot of gun owners. They're going to be very pissed off when they're having to select their favorite 2 guns. Yeah, chickened out. Well, I did. I just kind of went, I don't know that I want to be that guy. Because in the past, I would post stuff like that and then it would get proven wrong and I'd be like, but that was mainly on Facebook. I shouldn't worry about X. But, I just thought, let's hold off for a minute. Let's wait. And that's the problem. I think the key to social media success in this day and age is to just fly off the handle at every possibility. Like, I'm not the guy you come to for the latest news, because it always takes me like a week to go through it all and process it and like figure things out before I'll discuss things. That doesn't work. No one wants rational, well thought out arguments. We want fucking outrageous shit posts all the time. I did appreciate a lot of the hate comments I got. The hate comments were hilarious. Like, people go hard. It was kind of fun. But, yeah, anyway. But it was, you know, as I predicted, the next day there were like thousands of people saying the same thing. Anyway. Too late now. But my one of my things for 2026 is I'm just going to go hard at this shit from now on. I think if I come on here and I'm just going to say outrageous, crazy things, because that's what works on social media. Fuck this, like, thinking about things and working shit out. Also, should be probably... It seems that Facebook works on the first couple of minutes. So if you just don't say anything, that's why I usually play a bit of piano and sing at the start, because what are they going to do? They clearly don't watch the whole thing. I got thrown off there for a week for a short. The short was from a longer podcast. They didn't care about the longer podcast. But shorts, because I guess that's where everyone gets their information now. Shorts are the headlines of the day. And I hate shorts because they take everything out of context. They remove all the context. There was a case a little while ago of someone went into a couple of people went into some store in America. Anyway, she got called out. She was like, "Oh, you're racist," because she called them the N-word and all that kind of stuff. That's something I think I'm going to start saying. I'll just say the N-word rather than saying the actual word on the internet. I'll still say it on stage, obviously, because that's where it counts. But I will try harder in 2026 to actually build this thing up. You missed the ex-hate comments. They're pretty good. People are very creative. Like, it's hard to be funnier than the internet these days, you know? People, like, on the internet really fucking... They nail it sometimes. Anyway, back to Ted's thing. But this, I find this section interesting because he really has to say, you know, he's going through it's these people, it's those people, whatever, but then he has to say, but not all. So here we go. But not everyone who is associated with one of these movements is a leftist. What we're trying to get at in discussing leftism is not so much movement or an ideology as a psychological type, or rather a collection of related types. Thus, what we mean by leftism will emerge more clearly in the course of our discussion of leftist psychology. Even so, our conception of leftism will remain a good deal less clear than we would wish, but there doesn't seem to be any remedy for this. All we're trying to do here is indicate in a rough and approximate way the two psychological tendencies that we believe are the main driving force of modern leftism. We by no means claim to be telling the whole truth about leftist psychology. Also, our discussion is meant to apply to modern leftism only. We leave open the question of the extent to which our discussion could be applied to the leftists of the 19th and early 20th century. Yeah, there we go. That's as I was saying. But there does seem to be, like, opening positions, just as in chess, an opening position does not necessarily indicate the middle and end games. You can't predict an end game However, there are certain openings where you open in a certain position, you offer a certain gambit, you can kind of guess where the beginning of the game is going, the beginning of the middle game, but you can never really, it depends on your counter attacks and such and so forth. Because no two games are ever the same. But many games rhyme, just like history. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Although I tend to think it repeats. I'm kind of a big advocate of that whole time being circular and things just repeating again and again and again. I had some more thoughts about that, but we'll just move on. The two psychological tendencies that underlie modern leftism we call feelings of inferiority and over-socialization. Feelings of inferiority are characteristic of modern leftism as a whole, while over-socialization is characteristic only of a certain segment of modern leftism. But this segment is highly influential. Feelings of inferiority. By feelings of inferiority, we mean not only inferiority feelings in the strict sense, but a whole spectrum of related traits. Low self-esteem, feelings of powerlessness, depressive tendencies, defeatism, guilt, self-hatred, etc. Well, see, if that were true, those were the things, then I would be a leftist. But I have an internal fight going on against those things. We argue that modern leftists tend to have some such feelings, possibly more or less repressed, and that these feelings are decisive in determining the direction of modern leftism. When someone interprets as derogatory almost anything that is said about him or about groups with whom he identifies, we conclude that he has inferiority feelings or low self-esteem. Now, interesting that even back then he wasn't doing the he or she thing. More interesting, though, back in the 70s when Monty Python made The Life of Brian, they were jumping on the he or she thing. Like, they really got ahead of it. But it's interesting to see how long all of this stuff has been going on. Because even back then in the 70s, like, they called that out in the Life of Brian when they're sitting there and they're going, he or she. And he's like, why do you want to be a woman, Stan? Because I want to have babies. You can't have babies. Don't you oppress me. That was the whole thing. Like, this what nothing's really changed. It's just these things have expanded. And the war is being won. But, like, if you look at this whole thing as a war, it is like they are making mad progress. Now that people collect mental illnesses like Pokemon, it just seems that, I don't know, you got to wonder, is this all part of a larger plan, or are these just consequences of bad ideas? Psychology and psychiatry, they pathologize all behaviors. And once it's pathologized and named as a behavior by a psychologist or a psychiatrist, it automatically takes on a negative connotation. So there is nothing you can really do to be considered healthy in such a society. So, I don't know. This tendency is pronounced among minority rights activists, whether or not they belong to the minority group whose rights they defend. They are hypersensitive about the words used to designate minorities and about anything that is said concerning minorities. The term Negro, Oriental, handicapped, or chick for an African, an Asian, a disabled person, or a woman originally had no derogatory connotation. Broad and chick were merely the feminine equivalents of guy, dude, or fellow. The negative connotations have been attached to those terms by the activists themselves. I call them overthinkers. You're just thinking about it too much, and you're imposing, imposing your own nonsense on it. Some animal rights activists have gone so far as to reject the word pet and insist on its replacement by animal companion. Leftist anthropologists go to great lengths to avoid saying anything about primitive peoples that could conceivably be interpreted as negative. They want to replace the word primitive by non-literate. They seem almost paranoid about anything that might suggest that any primitive culture is inferior to our own. We do not mean to imply that primitive cultures are inferior to ours. We merely point out the hypersensitivity of leftish anthropologists. Those who are most sensitive about politically incorrect terminology are not the average black ghetto dweller, Asian, immigrant, abused woman, or disabled person, but a minority of activists, many of whom do not even belong to any oppressed group, but come from the privileged strata of society. That is very true. Most of these people that push all this nonsense are the most privileged people you'll ever meet. Anyone who attacks you for your white privilege tends to have a lot more privilege than you ever had, which is quite funny because they're coming from a place of guilt. But it does show how good we've got things. Like, I think it's kind of weird to complain about life, the way things are. I mean, we can complain about the way things are being run, but when you're like saying, oh, my phone is a piece of shit, I want a better phone, this is garbage. You're like, you mean that magic thing in your pocket that lets you watch TV anywhere, lets you communicate with anyone on the planet? It's not good enough? Come on, that's like, if you're complaining about that shit, that's just, you've gone off the deep end. Political correctness, all of these things, like, they're definitely, this is where they create their proxy warriors. It's a very smart move, but we understand the move now, and we got to course correct for this shit. We got to, straighten some of this out. Political correctness has its stronghold amongst university professors who have secure employment with comfortable salaries, and the majority of whom are heterosexual white males from middle to upper class families. Look, I don't think there's anything wrong with standing up for people who, are being screwed over. But when you automatically assume that someone's being screwed over, or you automatically, because someone belongs to a group, well, that's the racism that you decry and hate so much. So how does that work? How is racism good in your hands but not in anyone else's? That's the gun debate. That's, we should have guns, you shouldn't. Putting guns in the control of the stuff, like, that's not a good move. Gotta go, sent you FB request. Oh, okay, I'll check. I haven't looked at FB for a while. Thanks for dropping in, Jake. It's good to see you, mate. I'll try and do more of these in upcoming. As I always say, I will try to do more of these, but I think I am going to have more time coming up. Things may have taken a turn. Oh, Sandy, I did get paid by the company. They paid me, so all good in that regard. I just want to see if we can keep it going. Peace out, Jake. Take care, mate. Stay strong. Keep being awesome. Many leftists have an intense identification with the problems of groups that have an image of being weak. Women, defeated American Indians, repellent homosexuals, or otherwise inferior. The leftists themselves feel that these groups are inferior. They would never admit to themselves that they have such feelings, but it is precisely because they do see these groups as inferior that they identify with their problems. We do not mean to suggest that women, Indians, etc. are inferior. We are only making a point about leftist psychology. That is very true. I mean, you got to allow people to grow in strength. I mean, you need to come to strength, individually. That's just the nature of this world. That is the nature of this reality. Is when things are handed to you, it's not, then you start relying on the hand, which I believe is part of their tactic, to be honest. I think once you get people once people feel that they have strength because stuff's been handed to them, you can undermine that immediately by taking it away from them. It's a position I've put myself in many times in the past, and it does not lead to a feeling of security or strength. But that's just a reality of this world. It's, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be helped out. People should absolutely, we should be helping each other out more. But that's just not the way the world necessarily works. Anyway. Feminists are desperately anxious to prove that women are as strong and as capable as men. Clearly they are nagged by a fear that women may not be as strong and capable as men. That's the thing, women have a different kind of strength. I mean, just naturally women have a strength that men can't even, comprehend a lot of times. And in this attempt to make men and women completely equal, it's like it kind of degenerates the natural strength that they have. It certainly degenerates the natural strength that men have. And it leads to the current situation we have now, where women are saying, we're all the real men. Well, the real men are fucked off because they're just checked out. It's just like, I'm not going to deal with this shit anymore. Because apparently being a real man now means, that your wife has a boyfriend. I don't know, call me crazy, but, my preference is that my wife would not have a boyfriend of colour. It's kind of funny that we're at a point where you can't even really talk about your own natural preferences without people jumping on and going, oh, well, that's because you're racist and whatever. But no, it's just those are my preferences. You're racist and sexist. No, well, maybe, okay. Then I am. I guess I'm racist and sexist. I'm kind of happy that more and more people, I'm seeing this on Facebook. Facebook's very much a barometer for me, a barometer of like what's happening on the left and what's happening in society quite a lot, because I know a lot of those people. And it's just interesting how many more people are coming up and openly posting things on Facebook which are stuff that I agree with. Whereas for the past, 10 years, those people have remained very silent. But I guess that's the positive side of everyone having machetes in Melbourne. Speaking of which, I gotta sharpen my machetes and load my guns. JK. Leftists tend to hate anything that has an image of being strong, good, and successful. They hate America, they hate Western civilization, they hate white males, they hate rationality. The reasons that leftists give for hating the West, etc., clearly do not correspond with their real motives. They say they hate the West because it's warlike, imperialistic, sexist, ethnocentric, and so forth. But where these same faults appear in socialist countries or in primitive culture, the leftists find excuses for them. Or at the best, he grudgingly admits that they exist, whereas he enthusiastically points out and often greatly exaggerates these faults where they appear in Western civilization. Thus, it is clear that these faults are not the leftist's real motive for hating America and the West. He hates America and the West because they are strong and successful. Words like self-confidence, self-reliance, initiative, enterprise, optimism, etc. play little role in the liberal and leftist vocabulary. The leftist is anti-individualistic, pro-collectivist. He wants society to solve everyone's problems for them, satisfy everyone's needs for them, take care of them. He is not the sort of person who has an inner self-confidence in his ability to solve his own problems and satisfy his own needs. It's interesting because, I was kind of more... I don't think I've ever been strictly left, strictly right. I still don't think I'm strictly right. I'm, I don't know, somewhere in the middle maybe. But it's just interesting because a lot of the stuff that happened to me in life, I would be more... that is probably what took me towards the left, but I soon realized that the leftist solutions do not solve individual problems. In fact, they open up a world where those individual problems and abuses become way, way worse. And it just made me realize, at some point I just realized, well, no, that's not the way. The best thing you can do is make your corner of the world a better place. Just focus on your own, like what you have control of. So, like, if I had a family, I would make sure that my family grew up in a safe environment where certain abuses could not take place. And if those abuses did take place, I would deal with it in a very harsh manner and make sure that the victim of those abuses was okay. That is not what happened to me. So all I can do is make the world a better place. But after working in corporate for a while, I've realized that people don't really care about making the world a better place. They care about escaping a shitty world, which is another way to go, and it seems, at this point, it seems kind of perfectly reasonable. The way to escape that is to make a lot of money, and that seems to be what people seem to look at. Well, we're going to escape this nonsense, and maybe that's the way to do it. The leftist is antagonistic to the concept of competition because deep inside he feels like a loser. Art forms that appeal to modern leftish intellectuals tend to focus on sordidness, defeat, and despair. Or else they take an orgiastic tone, throwing off rational control as if there were no hope of accomplishing anything through rational calculation, and all that was left was to immerse oneself in the sensations of the moment. A civilization's art is so incredibly important to the civilization. The reason, I've heard it said that the reason that we will never have a revolution is because we don't have revolutionary art. Music has become, kind of soft in a lot of ways. In the 90s we had Rage Against the Machine, and they soon became Rage on Behalf of the System, which was kind of sad to see. But we just don't have those things We don't have revolutionary art. I've said it before. I think if you're an artist, you're best, like, you should be making revolutionary art, rather than degenerate art. Because degenerate art, if you look at what art has become, like with modern art is nonsense, rubbish. It's the same. When I was going to cover Idiot Box, there's a thing in there where he says, you know, if you say something's a poem, then it's a poem. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Here, I'm saying this is a poem. 6 beers for $20. That's a poem. It's not a good poem. But if you do look at it like that, you can see that everything serves a purpose. But that is what modern art was kind of all about. It's like, if I say this is art, then it's art. And it was all just garbage. And even the artists were saying this was garbage, this was crap. But they also found it as a great way to launder money. And, you know, so what are you going to do? But if you are an artist out there, make revolutionary art. Make, you know... And the easiest thing in the world is to... And I've resisted this many times. But if you write degenerate stuff, if you create degenerate stuff, it'll sell. And if you keep doing it, you know, if you draw pictures of children with dicks on their foreheads kind of thing, some pervert somewhere will buy it. So that comes back to the money paradox again. Anyway, modern leftish philosophers tend to dismiss reason, science, and objective reality, and to insist that everything is culturally relative. It is true that one can ask serious questions about the foundations of scientific knowledge and about how, if at all, the concept of objective reality can be defined. But it is obvious that modern leftish philosophers are not simply cool-headed logicians, systematically analysing the foundations of knowledge. That is true. We are in a battle for objective versus subjective reality. They want to push everything into this idea that everything is subjective. Once you go into everything being subjective, well, there is no basis for anything. You lose the basis for science, you lose the basis for reason. But this again creates a system of us and them. There will be those who observe objective reality, and there will be those who observe subjective reality. And I feel like subjective reality will be about control. Very much in the same way that the whole God and the devil, and people say God is about control, but actually when you follow the devil is about control, really. Perhaps religion's about control, but when you reduce it to concepts of good and evil, good says resist temptation. Evil says just give in to temptation. Once you give in to temptation, you become a slave to your, a slave to your desires. So it's actually, the good actually promotes freedom, responsibility, things like that. Anyway. They are deeply involved emotionally in their attack on truth and reality. They attack these concepts because of their own psychological needs. I wonder how much autism and things like this are a kind of a natural reaction to these kinds of ideas. Like, it's sort of like nature steps in and goes, nah. Like, people are talking about subjective reality. Nature just comes along and goes, here's an autistic person, deal with that. Because, truly autistic people, they just like, no, it is this way, and that is how it is. For one thing, their attack is an outlet for hostility, and to the extent that it is successful, it satisfies the drive for power. More importantly, the leftist hates science and rationality because they classify certain beliefs as true, i.e. successful, superior, and other beliefs as false, i.e. failed, inferior. The leftist's feelings of inferiority run so deep that he cannot tolerate any classification of some things as successful or superior, and other things as failed or inferior. This also underlies the rejection by many leftists of the concept of mental illness and of the utility of IQ tests. The whole IQ argument is more and more, like, I have found that it's just becoming a part. Like, you can point out that there are certain regions of the world that are very low IQ and they have certain behaviors, but people will always dissociate the behavior from the IQ and say that things like correlation doesn't mean causation. But then you end up with machetes on your streets. So, I don't know. Leftists are antagonistic to genetic explanations of human abilities or behavior because such explanations tend to make some persons appear superior or inferior to others. Leftists prefer to give society the credit or blame for an individual's ability or lack of it. Thus, if a person is inferior, it is not his fault, but society's, because he has not been brought up properly. The leftist is not typically the kind of person whose feelings of inferiority make him a braggart, an egotist, a bully, a self-promoter, a ruthless competitor. This kind of person has not wholly lost faith in himself. He has a deficit in his sense of power and self-worth, but he can still conceive of himself as having the capacity to be strong, and his efforts to make himself strong produce his unpleasant behavior. But the leftist is too far gone for that. His feelings of inferiority are so ingrained that he cannot conceive of himself as individually strong and valuable. Hence the collectivism of the leftist. He can feel strong only as a member of a large organization or a mass movement with which he identifies himself. Notice the masochistic tendency of leftist tactics. Leftists protest by lying down in front of vehicles. They intentionally provoke police or racists to abuse them, etc. These tactics may often be effective, but many leftists use them not as a means to an end, but because they prefer masochistic tactics. Self-hatred is a leftist trait. I'd say that's pretty true. I mean, I think that's a not exclusively a leftist trait, but it tends to be more of a leftist trait. Leftists may claim that their activism is motivated by compassion or by moral principles, and moral principle does play a role for the leftist of the over-socialized type. But compassion and moral principle cannot be the main motives for leftist activism. Hostility is too prominent a component of leftist behavior. So is the drive for power. Moreover, much leftist behavior is not rationally calculated to be of benefit to the people whom the leftists claim to be trying to help. For example, if one believes that affirmative action is good for black people, does it make sense to demand affirmative action in hostile or dogmatic terms? Obviously, it would be more productive to take a diplomatic and conciliatory approach that would make at least verbal and symbolic concessions to white people who think that affirmative action discriminates against them. I think the BLM thing has been quite eye-opening for a lot of people. Like, the fact that they took all that money and just bought houses and stuff. I mean, the entire leftist approach is that given the chance, people will be awesome. But it turns out that given the chance, people will be pieces of shit. Like that, I mean, that is proven again and again and again. The BLM types just going off and buying houses and getting rich and stacking that cash. Like, they weren't doing that for the movement. They were doing that for themselves. There was another example I've thought of just a moment ago, but now I cannot recall what it was. Perhaps it'll come back to me. Oh yes, that's what it was. The case recently where a bunch of leftist people basically helped a lot of Muslims and whatnot move into their society, and the Muslims did what the Muslims were always planning to do, which was get into politics and take over the system. And when they did that, they were successful because they had brought in so many Muslims that they took over positions in local government. Once they did that, they immediately banned all the gay flags and the gay pride and all this kind of stuff. And the people on the left were going, "Oh, how could you? We helped you," and all this kind of stuff. But like that's just not how things work. It shows that they will use whatever system. And if you offer people power, they're going to take it. You'd be crazy not to. It's like someone offering you $1 million and you're like, "No, thanks. No, I need to make this." Like, if they offer you $1 million thinking that you're going to back them all the way, but they haven't really even looked into it, whether you're with them or not, well, of course you're going to just take the money. You just take the money. And you take the power. So, I mean, we can see what all this is headed to, but leftists don't seem to be able to. I guess when you base your identity on all that kind of stuff, where you only care about the wins and not the consequences of your win, and you just assume the good in people. Like, it turns out that assuming the best in people is, kind of a mistake, because you assume that the best in people equals the best in what you think should happen. And that's just not, again, it's just not reality. Anyway. But leftist activists do not take such an approach because it would not satisfy their emotional needs. Helping black people is not their real goal. Instead, race problems serve as an excuse for them to express their own hostility and frustrated need for power. In doing so, they actually harm black people because the activists' hostile attitude towards the white majority tends to intensify race hatred. If our society had no special problems at all, the leftists would have to invent problems in order to provide themselves with an excuse for making a fuss. We emphasize that the foregoing does not pretend to be an accurate description of everyone who might be considered a leftist. It is only a rough indication of a general tendency of leftism. Alright, so we're up to part 24, over-socialization. So I might bounce on this one and come back to... let me just get my mouse working again. So yeah, we might come back... I'm not sure if I'll be able to continue this while I'm in Orion or not, but I will attempt to, because I'm kind of enjoying this, reading this and commenting on it as I go. It's quite good, quite fun. Anyway, so I'm going to bounce, I'm going to go eat something, and then I'm going to drive in my car for 7 hours. Fun. It's kind of fun. I like driving, so... that'll be alright. Driving in the night. Hopefully there won't be too many trucks on the road because they make me very nervous these days. Driving these days is very weird. It's just trucks all over the road. Anyway, so I just wanted to drop in and say happy 2026. Hope you're having all having a great time. I do feel that 2026 is going to be a good year. Not for everyone, of course, but for the important people. Me.
Again, but I know what'll make you feel better.
Oh, no, not another box of dogs!
It's another box of dogs!
Please like and subscribe as it helps me in the algorithm.